Sometimes the best laid plans can go awry, but then again, nobody said it was going to be easy. That's this week on Motoring 2004.
TSN's Motoring 2004 is brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oil. Oils fine-tuned for different engines. And Midas, Total Car Care. We do that.
It was about a year ago when we spoke with Canadian-bred Pierre Gagnon, the chairman and CEO of Mitsubishi Motors North America. It was an upbeat interview. The long-awaited arrival of Mitsubishi to Canada was now a reality, and with a full lineup of vehicles, Gagnon was confident of grabbing a good share of an already crowded market. But you know, timing is everything, and shortly after that, the automotive sector went into a slump. Mitsubishi sales in the United States are down, and while holding their own here in Canada, Mitsubishi did cancel plans to build a manufacturing plant. So what went wrong? Well, that's one of the questions we're going to ask Pierre Gagnon this week, and we'll also meet the all-new 2004 Galant, a car the company promises to be bigger, better, and faster.
The Galant is in its 9th generation for our company, 5th in North America, but it's the first time ever that we actually design, engineer, and build it for the North American consumer. So it's got the size that the North American consumer wants. It's got the power that the North American consumer wants. It's got that structural rigidity for the ride and handling characteristics that the North American consumer wants. It's got the design that we think will really catch the North American consumer's eye. So for us, this is our strongest entry yet in that big segment called the midsize sedan market. Well, in Canada, we're right on plan. We think we're going to hit about 20,000 sales this year, which was our original plan. Obviously, the Canadian economy is as it is in the U.S. It's fairly competitive right now, very high levels of incentives. So we're competing, and every month we're getting better.
This car is absolutely critical for us. It is a car that's built exclusively for North America, and it will not be sold in Japan. It's not being sold in Europe. So we had free rein to design exactly what we needed for this market. In the four-cylinder, we've got a 2.4-liter MyVec. MyVec is the Mitsubishi name for our variable valve timing technology. 160 horsepower. It has a lot of torque and a very good fuel economy because of the breathing of the VVT. In the 3-liter, we have a V6 3.8-liter, I should say. We're moving up from a 3-liter in the previous generation. 230 horsepower, 250 foot-pounds of torque. So it has a lot of get up and go, a lot of grunt, which is really what that off-the-line acceleration that the V6 buyer in particular is looking for.
When you ask somebody, if you hadn't bought a Galant, what would you have bought? It's typically the Honda Accord, the Toyota Camry, and to a lesser extent the Nissan Altima. So those are really the big competitors, and we are a player in that segment. We've done very well in it. It is our biggest seller.
The Galant will be a good contender for the top of that category, but the only problem, Mitsubishi has to let people know that they're there and stop abandoning that advertising with 4 kids in a car. I mean, head banging, because that doesn't sell car, at least in Canada.
Well, they want to break through in a big way. I don't think they've done that quite yet so far. They more or less blew their wad when they came to Canada with a full line, and now I think what they need to do is refresh and bring their models up to more modern standards, which they're doing with the Galant here. It's a thoroughly modern car, and it has all the amenities that its competitors have.
We faced the same challenges at one time in the U.S. market. We launched in 1983. We didn't go nationwide till 1988, so we were playing catch up in that market as well. But over time, we've been able to raise awareness, get on people's shopping lists, and same thing's going to happen in Canada. We're very confident of that.
If you had one shot left in your camera, what shot would you take? What's your favorite shot of this?
I like a lower front three-quarter view, kind of like a telephoto shot. It really gives the sense that the car's got a nice strong wedge to it. It looks like it's in motion, and it also shows a very unique front face.
I think the front end looks a bit too much like a Pontiac Grand Prix. However, the rest of the car is, I think, quite beautiful.
Well, I think Mitsubishi has done a good job with the new Galant. I mean, compared to the old one, it's much better in so many ways. It feels more solid, the suspension is much more composed, and the design is nicer. I think that now more than ever, the Galant is closer to the level of the big guys, the Honda Accord and the Nissan Altima.
Yes, we've had a little bit of a downturn in the U.S. The competition has got lots stiffer, but 2003 will still be our 4th best year ever in our 21-year history, so we'll probably break the 300,000 vehicle level, so we're still having a good year. And with all the new models that we're launching, particularly Galant, which is our high-volume vehicle, we're looking a lot more optimistic.
No, it's not a hood ornament, but even if you do know what that is, you have no idea what that's got to do with motoring. All will be revealed later on Kenzie's Corner.
If you believe the advertising, when Volkswagen decided to get into the SUV game, they contemplated any number of things, including doing unmentionable things to the poor old Beetle. Thankfully, they opted for the clean sheet approach. This week on Test Drive, it's the all-new Touareg. Once famous for its people's car persona, Volkswagen is moving up market with a vehicle that not only handles like the dickens when on road, it is a stalwart in the dirt. The key to the balance between these divergent disciplines is the raft of electronic trickery available. To say the Touareg is an electronic sophisticate is not to overstate the case. When you get to your favourite off-road spot, it's as easy as 1, 2, 3. Select neutral, punch this button, select low range and lock the centre differential if you're smart. Punch the other button, you're now jacking the air suspension up to its maximum ride height, which gives you a maximum of 11 inches of ground clearance. You're now ready for some serious fun in the Touareg. Once the suspenders have been hoisted on high, the Touareg rumbles up impossibly steep hills and then descends them as easily thanks to the engine braking and hill descent assist. Essentially, the anti-lock brakes limit the descent speed to a handful of clicks. Should the going get really sticky, the centre and rear differentials can be locked separately, which brings tank-like traction and all the right numbers. For example, the approach and departure angles measure 28 and 33 degrees respectively. It can climb and descend 45-degree slopes, and when absolutely necessary, it can ford 2 feet of water without bogging down. Inside the Touareg, well, everything comes first class. For instance, all the power items you can shake a stick at, up to and including a power tilt and telescopic steering wheel that features cruise control and audio functions mounted on its face. You also get a classic set of gauges, and move into the centre stack, well, the logic continues, especially if you go with the optional 4-zone climate control system. Now, as it infers, you can dial in separate settings for both front passengers and for the 2 in the outboard positions in the rear, and they also enjoy heated seats in the winter. Now, when you move to the nav system, it's a slightly different case. Whilst it's easy to program and clear and concise in giving directions, none of the streets on the map are labelled, and so as a map it's redundant, which is plain dumb. As good as it is in the dirt, the Touareg more than holds its own when on road. While you must be mindful of the fact that you are piloting a fairly tall vehicle, it whizzes through the pylons with the fervour usually reserved for a true sports car. Setting the suspension in its sport mode hunkers the Touareg down so that body roll is almost non-existent. That the steering is precise and direct rather than numb and vague as is usually the case underscores the Toureg's sporty nature. Factor in the oversized 255/55 R18 all-season tyres and you complete a pretty picture. You know, I've prattled on a lot about how good this thing is both on and off road, but it also gets its fair share of utility. To begin with the seats up where you get 31 cubic feet of cargo space. Flop the seats down and that number rises to 71 cubic feet. You also get all of the stuff you expect. A privacy cover to keep prying eyes off your stuff, power outlets and tie-down hooks to keep the cargo secure. The one thing you don't get, however, is a backup sensing aid. Hello, boy. Now you need one of those in case a dog wanders up. Now given that this thing costs $75 large and that it's got headrests and big D-pillars, it makes for tight sight lines to the rear. Now as I say, having paid $75 large for the privilege of owning this thing, I expect a backup sensing system to be standard and not an option. Here, boy. Power, at least when the up-level Audi Source 4.2 litre V8 is stuffed under the hood, is never an issue. With 310 horsepower and 302 pounds-feet of torque on tap, the Touareg pulls across a very broad range, and this in spite of its heavy 5,100 pound curb weight. Tromp the gas pedal from a standstill and a ton appears on the clock in 7.8 seconds. Better yet, the exhaust note and its nice raspy guttural roar really does sound the part. From the engine, the power is relayed through a 6-speed automatic that features normal, sport and manumatic modes. The slick nature and multi-mode design means you're never caught in the wrong gear, regardless of the circumstance or terrain. You know, the new Volkswagen Toureg really does set a new benchmark, primarily because it manages to put some serious sport into its SUV name. That it manages to bridge the gap between serious luxury car and serious off-roader is a trump card that's going to pay big dividends down the road.
Our Midas tip of the week concerns wheel lock tools. If your vehicle has alloy wheels or an upgraded wheel and tire package, in most cases it's going to come factory equipped with wheel locks. That means somewhere in the vehicle you've got a key or a tool just like this to unlock that one special wheel nut per wheel that ensures that your wheels and tires can't get easily stolen off the vehicle. If you look on this vehicle, there's that special wheel nut. Now, it's fairly fragile at the tip. It's a fairly intricate little design where it engages, so this one particular nut shouldn't be removed with an impact gun. You should remove it by hand. Now, it's quite acceptable to use an impact gun to remove the others and even to tighten them down initially and then remember to torque them all properly with a torque wrench. But never use the air impact gun on the locking tool. Couple of other tips: make sure that you've got the reorder number somewhere in that vehicle. There's usually a little card in there from Magard, the company that makes this tool, and it gives you a reorder number if you lose it. Also, make sure that it's readily available for service personnel when you bring your vehicle in so they're not rummaging around looking for it and wasting time, and make good and sure that you get it back when the vehicle comes back. Now, one other tip that I'll give you: all of us mechanics have an engraving tool for marking our hand tools. It's a good idea to engrave something on the wheel lock tool so that if by chance this thing stays on the workbench or in somebody's pocket, they'll know whose it is and be able to return it to you. Now, if by chance you lose the special lock key and you can't find the reorder number, there's still one avenue left. Many shops have a special tool that can grip the outside of this. It's a pretty expensive tool, not everybody has it, but it will grip the outside of this, and if the lock nut wasn't over-torqued, these tools have enough power to remove the special lock nut. Then you can replace it or reorder it. That's your Midas tip of the week.
Well, it's a 2003 911 twin turbo, which is the benchmark model for Porsche. This one has the X50 engine package, which is basically the same engine as their GT3. So it has 456 horsepower compared to 415. Now, the standard turbo at 415 will certainly get your attention, but at 456 it really opened your eyes. Porsche is a sports car company, and I think that Professor Ferdinand Porsche had certain ideas, and he had very much control of the company, and this very much reflects, all of the cars reflect his love of sports cars. And all the other people building sports cars, the sports cars are a marketing statement for them. With Porsche, they are survival. The cars are quieter. For the first time a couple of years ago, they started using cup holders, where the Germans' engineer's point of view was, if you're driving a car on the Autobahn at 300 kilometers an hour and you need a coffee, stop and have a coffee. You don't need the distraction. So eventually they got their arm twisted enough by the marketing people that they put in the cup holders. So, and they do have cup holders today. But let's face it, probably 50% of the market is in North America. So it's, the North American driver, we spend a lot of time sitting on the highway, or as Canadians do anyway.
Like most vehicles in this segment, the 2004 Mitsubishi Galant comes with a choice of two powertrains, an inline-4 and a V6. Well, obviously the V6 is more powerful, but is it that simple when making the right decision? Well, let's get some advice from our man in the Quaker State garage, Bill Gardner.
Well, Brad, on the Mitsubishi Galant, there's a big difference in displacement between those two engines as well. The four-cylinder is 2.4 liters, and the V6 apparently is 3.8 liters. So that extra 1.4 liters of engine displacement is going to make a huge difference. The bigger engine is going to have a lot more torque and a lot more horsepower. But think about it, if this is just a passenger car, and in all likelihood, people that are going to buy this car are going to use it for very light duty use. 1 or 2 passengers commuting back and forth to work, maybe some highway trips. It's not the kind of vehicle you'd likely tow a trailer with or do anything strenuous or serious with. So unless you live in mountainous terrain where you're really got some load going up those long, steep grades, if you're not living in the mountains, I'd probably think about the smaller engine because you'll save a lot on fuel. You always pay the fuel mileage penalty when you get the bigger engine. And when you get a bigger engine in a small vehicle, it's harder to work on. So in many cases, the small engines are easier to service. That's another thing to keep in mind. Now, talking about servicing, we're looking at the brakes today on this Hyundai. And when you're doing a brake inspection, there's a number of things you want to look for. First of all, when you pull the wheel, you can get a good look at the rotor finish, the surface finish of the rotor, which in this case is really good on the outboard side. Now, another thing that you want to look at is the condition and amount of wear that's on the brake pads, and you want to look at all the hydraulic components in the brake system as well. Now, when you're doing these inspections, in many cases, it's easier to remove the caliper to get a good look at the caliper and the brake pads, and you can see how easily they come off. Just a couple of bolts, and I'm going to compress the piston a little bit so that the caliper will clear the pads easily, and then just wiggle it off. Now this gives me a chance to look at the caliper to make sure there's no fluid leaks around here and there's no tears in the piston boot. And I can also set the caliper aside and I can get the brake pads out and have a good look. There's lots of friction material left on these brake pads, and I can get a good look at the inboard side of the brake rotor as well. And in this case, the surface finish is just as good on the inboard side as the outboard. But that isn't always the case. Now here's some brake parts that I took off a different front-wheel drive vehicle just the other day. You can see that the brake rotor has a great finish on the outboard side, just as good as the Hyundai. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that finish. But when you flip it over and look at the inboard side, you can see that the finish is all pocked with rust. There's all kinds of blemishes in the finish of this rotor. And matter of fact, it's so abrasive, this surface on the inboard is so abrasive that it almost completely wore out the inboard brake pad. This brake pad was up against this side of the rotor, and it's almost down to the wear indicator right there. There's the rivets, and they're almost flush with the friction material. So this pad's almost worn out. Now, this pad here was the outboard one, the one that was against this side of the rotor, and you can see that there's all kinds of friction material left on this one. And this is not an uncommon thing. If you live in an area of high humidity, like for example around the Great Lakes or on eastern or western seaboard of the country, you're going to get a lot of corrosion on your brake rotors. This is an iron part and it's normal that it corrodes. So this is something you want to check for. When the surface gets like this, you've got a couple of choices. You can machine it on a brake lathe to clean it up if the rotor's thick enough, or you can replace the rotor. Those are two options that you've got. In any case, it's a good idea to have routine brake inspections done, usually coinciding with the time that you rotate the wheels on the car. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 2004.
The owner's manuals for certain cell phones say don't use them at a self-serve for fear of explosion. Just about every gas pump in Canada has a no cell phone sign on it for the same reason, which means I better get rid of the cell phone. But you know, cell phones do not cause gas stations to blow up. That's an urban myth. It's fooled thousands of people. It wouldn't fool us, but hey, we're smarter than average, right? But there is a real risk of fire at a self-serve. Obviously, smoking is a stupid thing to do, but also the mere act of getting your Visa card out to pay for the gas. You got polyester pants, you slide across your vinyl upholstery, the static buildup comes along, you touch the gas pump, kaboom, it's the bone orchard for everybody. And there's another reason not to use a cell phone in a gas station. Gasoline is dangerous stuff. If we didn't have it and somebody invented it, they'd never let us have it. So when you're filling your car, you shouldn't be doing anything else but paying attention to the task. So don't use your cell phone at a self-serve, and don't wear polyester pants. I'm Jim Kenzie.
The launch of the 2004 Galant was a major one for Mitsubishi. They invited automotive journalists from across North America and Mexico. And most of the journalists we talked to agree that the new Galant is a better looking and better driving car than the previous generation. What Mitsubishi has to do now is get the attention of a generation that grew up with Honda and Toyota. But if the Galant is any indication, all this company needs is a little more patience and maybe a little more money, and they'll soon see a light at the end of the tunnel. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an oncoming Camry with its headlights on. That's it for now. We'll see you next time out as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
We are not only developing good product for the time being and improving that product over the next period of time, we're setting the stage for the eventual transition to a hydrogen economy and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, which will still be hybridized.
TSN's Motoring 2004 has been brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oil, oils fine-tuned for different engines, and Midas, Total Car Care. We do that.